Welcome back, everyone, to the Aurora Show. And we're almost done with this series. And then, of course, I've got a lot of other great videos I really want to dive into. But today we're going to dive into Aquarius risings. And, like I kind of mentioned with Capricorn and all of them, like, there's a uniqueness to all of these story arcs, right? All of these kind of archetypal blueprints. And so with Aquarius, if you're an Aquarius rising, I think that there's a very unique archetype here and a very unique story arc. As I mentioned in the Capricorn rising video, Saturn was the ancient ruler of both Aquarius and Capricorn. So Aquarius does actually share some similarities with Capricorn. However, its modern ruler is Uranus. And Uranus was discovered in 1781, and this was during a time, of course, I think a lot of the associations that we have with these planets, right, is based on one, the naming of the planet, which I have some beef with some of the namings of the planets, as I've shared before. Feminine were very much left out of the archetypes. That's why my genuine feeling is Jupiter and Neptune were misnamed. They are not masculine archetypes at all. But also the feminine were just very left out in general. I also have a little bit of beef with the fact that astronomers, now back in the day, ancient astrology, right? Astronomers and astrologers were one and the same. These were people that studied the movement of the planets, studied the mathematics, and also studied the pattern recognition and the archetypes of the way that these placements and charts, like chart casting and predictive astrology and all that kind of stuff would play out in real life. Over time, there was a separation of that, right? So in modern day, an astronomer is very different from an astrologer. Now, you can have astrologers that understand astronomy, right? And you can have astronomers that understand astrology, but it's very rare to have them be intertwined. And so in modern history, astronomers, the ones who discovered planets, right, discovered them, they came into our awareness, were the ones who named the planets. And they have no understanding of the archetypal energy of astrology, right? So they would often look back to like Greek and Roman mythology to name the planets, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when you don't understand the fact that you are bringing an archetype into the collective consciousness, and then you have to study how that archetype is now playing out in the collective through mass events, through individual charts, you can't just willy-nilly name shit, right? And so this is why I think with Uranus and Neptune, these were named by astronomers, okay, not astrologers. Now, Pluto being the exception, because Pluto is actually the only planet who has ever been named by popular vote. And I fully agree with that method. Okay, so Pluto was discovered in 1930 out of an observatory in, I believe, Arizona, and they put out a popular vote. So people could submit suggestions, right, for the naming of this planet, and then it was by popular vote. I love that method because that means that the collective actually voted for the Lord of the Underworld and his archetype to be brought into the consciousness. Okay, so we decided this is what we need, right? Consciously or unconsciously. But Uranus and Neptune were named by astronomers. And so, it is what it is. But Uranus was discovered during a time of a lot of revolution. Okay, so this was during the American Revolution. The French Revolution came just a few years after the discovery of Uranus. We had the Haitian Revolution and a few others kind of sprinkled around the world. So Uranus and Aquarius now is very associated with rebellion, revolts, revolutions. Okay, so that changes your archetype, right? The other thing that Uranus is very associated with is technology and technological innovation, because post 1781, right, probably a little bit after the revolutions, because that was a crazy time, but looking at the early 1800s, we started to have technological advancements, right? The printing press being one of them. Railroads and railroads and railways, part of the Industrial Revolution. And then, of course, later on, like if you look at the years in the 1990s and early 2000s, so Uranus was in Capricorn until I believe it's going to test me. I believe like 1994 or 95, I think around there, because I'm 1990 and I have Uranus at like 11 degrees or something like that. So probably in like 1994 or so. Okay. Now, when Uranus moved into Aquarius, so it would have been there through the 90s and briefly into the early 2000s, what did we have? A huge boom in technology, the internet, social media. This is very Uranian. Okay, so if you are an Aquarius rising, you have a very unique archetype. Now, fun fact. The Uranus archetype or the Uranus story arc is very underrepresented currently on the planet. Now, we did have Gen Z, who the majority of them are born with both Uranus and Neptune in Aquarius. So they carry a lot of this Aquarian energy. Of course, all the babies being born now with Pluto in Aquarius carry that energy. But traditionally, Aquarius season has the lowest birth rates. So if we're just talking sun sign, right? Aquarius is the least represented on Earth, whereas Scorpio is actually the most popular birth time. So we have a huge amount of like Libra and Scorpio energy and a very little amount of Aquarian energy, right? Now, also the birth rates are declining right now for so many reasons that we can't cover in this video, but we all know all the reasons why. Birth rates are heavily declining, which means there isn't as many babies being born with Pluto in Aquarius than previous generations, such as the baby boomers, who are the largest generation on Earth and one of the largest generations in all of modern history, who have Pluto in Leo. And a lot of them also have Uranus in Leo. So the Leo energy is overrepresented on the planet, just talking baby boomers themselves, right? With Pluto in Leo and a lot of them with Uranus in Leo. And the fact that Aquarius suns are the least popular birth times of the whole zodiac. So basically what I mean is that the Aquarian archetype, I think, is the least represented on the planet and the least understood for all of these above reasons. And so if you are an Aquarius rising, this also, of course, relates to people who have a lot of Aquarius placements, right? If you have heavy Aquarius placements in your chart, you're going to relate to a lot of these themes. So what we have to understand is that when a planet changes rulership, it changes archetypes. Okay, so this is going to be most applicable for my Aquarius risings and Neptune risings. Words today. Pisces risings. Sorry. Because you both had a rulership change. Aquarius was in 1781, switched over to Uranus rulership. Neptune was discovered in the 1850s and became the modern ruler of Pisces, whereas your ancient ruler was Jupiter. So Aquarius and Pisces risings, your story arcs have changed the most significantly. Runner up is Scorpio, who didn't lose its rulership of Mars, but it added a co-ruler of Pluto. Now, why they did that is another interesting question, right? Why did Pluto become a co-ruler of Scorpio along with Mars? But when we're talking about Aquarius and Pisces, they changed rulership. I don't know. Question for another day. But so you guys are the ones who have the most undeveloped story arc. And this is because even though it seems like, okay, 1781, right? That was a few hundred years ago. But in the scheme of humanity, that is like a drop in the bucket, right? So the Aquarian energy is still very much being anchored on the planet. We are in the age of Aquarius now. I know there's a lot of lot of discussion and arguments and hot topics about that. I really don't care. We are in the age of Aquarius. We are moving into the age of Aquarius. Fight me on it. It doesn't matter to me. I don't really care about the detail, logical logistics. I'm telling you, frequency wise, we are entering the age of Aquarius. Pluto's in Aquarius, right? Now, Pluto was demoted in 2006. This is another fun fact. So Pluto was demoted, and from the best researchers that I can find and books that they've written, Pluto, or any planet that becomes demoted, has about a 30-year window to where that planet's influence starts to wane out of the consciousness. So for example, this happened with Ceres in the 1800s. Ceres was actually named a planet in 1800. She was the third feminine planet, and she got demoted in 1850 or before, just before 1850. So it took a while for her energy to wane out of the consciousness to where now we barely even include Ceres in terms of chart readings, right? So the same is happening with Pluto. 1930, demoted in 2006, which brings us to 2036. Time's not linear, but using that as a milestone, what we do know is that Pluto's transit through Aquarius will be its last official Plutonic moment, okay, before its energy kind of wanes out of the being one of the main planets, right? So Pluto in Aquarius is not going to go out quietly, right? And it's no wonder that its final kind of Plutonic era is going to be in Aquarius. Now, we also have the North Node entering Aquarius at the end of July this year, and that will be an 18-month cycle. So I am a North Node Aquarius. So for all my North Node Aquariuses, we will be entering our nodal returns. So this is a big year and a big next couple of years for my Aquarius risings. With the modern ruler of Uranus, and now we have to look at the fact that the ancient ruler was Saturn. So Aquarius and Capricorn actually had a lot in common. Capricorn is about the physical structures and systems, okay? Such as how our government structure works, okay? How we build physical structures such as cities, communities, states. Saturn is boundary lines, how we've divvied up land into different nations and different states and different cities and different counties, right? That is a Saturnian influence. There is a clear boundary, there is a clear structure, there is a clear hierarchy, right? There's a pecking order of power here. So local government, state government, federal government, right? Rules and regulations. It is how the physical structures of our life are built and how we work within them, whereas Aquarius is more about the social structures, right? How we behave as a society, how we work and interact as a society, and what are the social structures, social guidelines, social rules. Those are different, right? Now with the modern ruler of Uranus. So just funny, like, you know, again, a fun fact, like every year the presidential inauguration is on January 20th, which is when typically within that day or the next day, the sun is transitioning into Aquarius. Right? So it's just, you know, I just find those things interesting. Like, why did they pick January 20th? That's such a fucking random day. It's typically the day the sun ingresses into Aquarius. And so maybe back in the day, Aquarius was seen as kind of the social ruler, right? The person who was in charge of the masses, while also that Capricorn influence is they are at the top of the pecking order, right? The president is at the top of the pecking order. So just an interesting note. But with the modern ruler of Uranus, right? If Saturn is about boundaries and rule following and systems and structures and guidelines and pecking orders, Uranus is about figuring out the way that those rules and systems work so that they can break those rules, so that they can collapse the pecking order, so that they can disturb the natural rule of law, if you will. So Uranus is a very rebellious, disruptive granddaddy type energy. Okay. He has wisdom. Like, okay, think of your average granddad, right? This is a way that I think of Uranus. Saturn is the daddy. Okay. Saturn is the dad. He's the one working hard. This is symbolic, right? I know not all dads are living up to the ideal of what the father energy is. Okay. But ideally and symbolically, the dad is the one who is hardworking, consistent. Again, not saying women aren't, but this is the archetype, right? We're working hard. We're doing what we need to do to provide for the family, to provide a legacy, right? To have discipline and structure in the household or at work or whatever it is. We color in between the lines. We do what we're told. In many ways, Saturn answers to Jupiter, who is the mother, and that's another story for another day. But they are coloring inside the lines. Saturn requires structure. Saturn needs to be told what they should be doing. Okay? And that does come from Jupiter. Uranus is like the granddad. Okay? He's done that time. And now, right? He breaks all the rules, okay? We're like, granddad, you need to be eating healthier, take care of yourself. And he's like, fuck you, I'm drinking my Diet Coke every day. And yeah, I'm going to have my whiskey and cigar in the morning. I don't care about your rules. I'm doing whatever I want. That's very Uranus energy, okay? He's saying inappropriate shit. He's saying whatever comes to his brain, no filter. He's a little disruptive. He's a little... really can't contain him. That is Uranus. Okay. So as an Aquarian archetype, your rulership is Uranus. Now this is interesting because for instance, with, Pluto, right? Or with, Scorpio, I said, look at both your Mars and your Pluto, right? They're both relevant. With Aquarius, you don't have a more ancient ruler to look to. Now, you could look to your Saturn, right, just to see where it is. But it's not going to carry the same tone as a Capricorn rising. So a Capricorn rising, as we talked about, has a heavy karmic load for whatever reason. But they're here to break a karmic cycle, and a lot of it is going to center around a lesson that must be learned. As your Uranus archetype, you are here to break the rules. So what you might find is that if you look to your Saturn, you might see that this is where you tend to play it safe. This is where you tend to actually play by the rules. You play it safe. You do what you're supposed to. But your Uranus is going to tell you where you must break out, where you must be untraditional, where you must follow your innovation and your genius, even if it requires you to break rules, even if it requires you to be rebellious, even if it requires you to go against the grain and stand alone and not kind of be with everybody else and with the masses. That is the true archetype of Aquarius. So in the shadow, right? So your first house, guys, is Aquarius. Your aura is disruptive. Okay, it naturally disrupts the status quo. Now, the key here is you don't want to be a rebel without a cause, okay? Because a rebel without a cause is disruptive and interfering for no other reason other than because they don't want to follow the rules. They don't want to do what everybody else is doing, right? They're going against the grain for the sake of going against the grain. That's not the energy we want, because what's going to happen is you're going to put so many people off that your true archetype can't do what it needs to do, this is why I think you can look to the Saturn, right? First, what is the cause? What do you care about? That's going to tell you some things. What do you care about? And then Uranus is going to tell you how you rebel through that cause. Okay, so the archetype here is rebellion. There's a great book out there. I forget the author's name, but it's called, having the courage to be disliked, or how to have the courage to be disliked, something like that. That is Aquarius. You have to have the courage to be disliked. You have to be okay with a lot of times being ahead of your time and people not understanding you, people rejecting you, people ostracizing you, mocking you, etc., because you are so ahead of where everybody else is, because you're willing to be different. You're willing to be authentic. This is why at its core, Aquarius is humanitarian. They care about equality, humanness, like they care about social structures, society structures. Now, in the shadow of Aquarius, there is a detachment here because Aquarius is air. And they're about pattern recognition. They're about watching the patterns and looking at how to break those patterns, right? They're watching the systems and structures, seeing what works and doesn't work. And then when they find that something doesn't work, they're going to rebel against it. They're going to quite literally revolutionize it, right? They're going to be deeply resistant to doing the same thing over and over again, like the famous quote of Albert Einstein, who, by the way, had heavy Aquarius energy. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. And Aquarius understands that. We've got to do something different. But in the shadow, so they're very, very detached. They're more objective. They're in pattern recognition. They're about being unique and having this very electric essence, this very unique frequency. And so a lot of times this, can lead to them actually, because they're so used to being rejected or not understood, or people think they're weird or whatever, they can isolate. They isolate by themselves, and they can actually come to hate humanity because they see the darkness of humanity. They see how people treat each other. They see how people just kind of, because it's right before Pisces, right? Where Pisces, we experience the actual suffering of the collective. In Aquarius is where we see the horribleness of humanity and the greatness of humanity simultaneously, which is why with Pluto in Aquarius right now, it's very intense, because we are with Pluto in Capricorn for 16 years, we saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of hierarchy, of government, of corporations, of the systems and structures. Pluto in Aquarius, amongst other things, is going to be showing us the good, the bad, and the ugly of humanity. Because it's time for humanity to take accountability for themselves, where it can't just all be the elite's fault. It can't just all be the government's fault. It can't just all be the PDF's fault, right? You need to take accountability as well for the darkness you hold as a humanity, because all those people you hate are part of the same collective consciousness. They're part of the same humanity that you are, right? So that's going to be part of it. And so I think that the Aquarians have a real contract, especially the next couple of years, to blaze the path, to truly be authentic. Again, that first house is about emanating authenticity. It will be detrimental if you follow the crowd, if you don't stand for something you really believe in, and if you're not focused on humanity and the love for humanity, that can also be a detriment, right? So this goes to the second house of your self-worth, your manifestations, your income, right? How you derive your self-worth in the world, and thus how you manifest worth to you, right? And that's going to be ruled by Pisces. So again, the self-worth, unfortunately, can be very wrapped up in others, right? Because Pisces is very empathic. They feel the suffering of others. So what you don't want to do is go into savior complexes, okay? So if your self-worth is derived from constantly overgiving and helping others and kind of trying to save them, that is not honoring your authenticity and uniqueness, okay? But what I will say is this is an area where you guys can manifest in an extremely unique way. It is through following synchronicities. It is through intuitiveness. It is really one of those things where you just constantly trust the universe that like you will have what you need when you need it. Like that's the Pisces way. So if your self-worth, instead of being derived from how much you're helping others, right? Which can become a complex, okay? It needs to be derived from how much you trust in the universe. Now, the empathy is very strong with the second house. So you also have to be careful of not giving too much money away to others, not constantly like letting your abundance and prosperity leak out to others, right? It needs to be a healthy giving and receiving. Third house is ruled by Aries. You guys are strong speakers, and the world needs to hear the truth. Now, we just had the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries that likely for a lot of you landed in your third house, in Placidus, in whole sign, of course, but in Placidus for a lot of you would be the third house. So you need to speak the truth to the world. Okay, you need to tell them how it is. Again, this is going to trigger the second house because a lot of that sense of self-worth and how you gain prosperity in the world is through feeling empathetic and compassionate to others. So it can kind of be, there can be a tension because the third house of Aries wants you to be bold. Bold. Speak the truth. Say what you want to say. Don't sugarcoat it. You guys are powerful speakers. Okay, but it can sometimes cause tension with that second house where if your, let's say, income, the way that you generate prosperity for yourself is dependent on victimhood, right? People want you to take care of them, the savior complex, or it's that, you know, you're so used to being overly compassionate, overly giving, then it can feel like speaking the cold, harsh truth is dangerous. You have to do it anyway. This is the Uranian first house. You have to be authentic. It has to be true to your frequency, or that is where that second house gets corrupted in Pisces, okay? Now, the fourth house, first angular house, home and family, the inner self, this is ruled by Taurus, and this is really interesting. Okay, for one, you could have grown up in a very stable household, actually, because Taurus is quite stable, right? It's a really deep foundation, deep roots with Taurus. So maybe you have a deep sense of connection to your lineage, to your family. There's like deep roots there. Maybe your childhood was pretty basic, right? It was just normal. Taurus is normality in many ways. So maybe it felt like your childhood and growing up just seemed really normal, really status quo. And so what's going to happen is that first house ruled by Uranus doesn't want normal. It actually hates normality, or whatever we call normality. Now, again, what's going to happen is you will see these people be black sheep. They will often be the ones who rebel against their childhood. They rebel against normality. It's boring to them. It's uninteresting to them. The stability of it is almost too much for them to bear. But like I said, you have to be a rebel with a cause. Okay? Don't rebel against your family. Don't rebel against your normal upbringing simply because you find it boring or you find stability irritating. Right? There is a good thing to have stability. There's a good thing to have a solid relationship within yourself, right? To feel like you are stable within the fourth house of home. You want to have a stable home structure, okay? You need to fight the urge, okay? Fight the urge to constantly be trying to change everything about your life, okay? The Uranian influence of the first house is going to always it's bored easily. It wants change. It wants evolution. You need to fight the urge to constantly disrupt your foundation of your life. Okay. With that being said, you rebel when you must. You follow the path that is most authentic to you. Also, Pisces second house, please be careful of how much money you spend, how much money you give away. Okay, these people can have a very odd relationship with money. Money doesn't mean much to them. It comes, it goes, it falls from the sky, or it doesn't. And that is a great thing because, again, your mode of manifestation is greatly tuned into your spirit. There's a huge trust in the universe here of like everything, I'll have everything when I need it, right? It's all going to come. And you also might find that you can gain a lot more abundance through the use of your intuition, through the use of your compassion, empathy, through spiritual healing, anything like that. But you also have to be careful about the wishy-washiness of Pisces. In order to create that solid foundation of the fourth house, which means you need a solid home. It's important to you. That Uranian energy is erratic. And if you have a very disrupted sense of, the core sense of self is very disrupted, or if you don't have any sort of stability, it's the best word, stability in your life, that is, it's just not ideal. And so if you spend all your money and you can't keep track of it, it's going to disrupt your stability because you're not going to be able to have a stable home, right? And I think that that is very important. Now, leading to the fifth house of your joy, your creative expression, what lights you up in the world, right? This is the house of Leo, the sister sign. Your fifth house is ruled by Gemini. So again, just like in Aries' third house, the self-expression here is about talking. You guys, I'm telling you, your ideas need to be shared with the world, your unique perspectives, again, a lot of Aquarius risings or people with a lot of Aquarius placements can be very interested in things that are in service to the whole, but that are a little niche. Okay, that's the best way I can describe Aquarius. Aquarius is niche, whereas its sister sign Leo is what is popular. And Aquarius is niche. Okay, so it's mainstream versus underground, if that makes sense. Your interests, your passions, you need to speak, you need to share. Okay, we need your little niche ideas. The way you see the world is very unique. Your perspectives. So you might find that you're really into any form of self-expression, writing, public speaking, podcasting, writing a book, comedy. Gemini is also learning. So always keep yourself stimulated through learning. Also have a lot of little creative hobbies. This really keeps the energy flowing. It's a really fun house to have Gemini in, I must admit. And you'll be very attracted to people who are mentally stimulating for you. Now, sixth house of health and wellness and your daily routines is going to be ruled by Cancer. And this is so interesting, okay? Because Aquarius actually does relate to children because Leo is the child. Leo is the inner child, right? And so being the sister sign of Aquarius, Aquarius is kind of loves learning and teaching children. And Leo actually really likes to be one with the children, right? They're the ones who are like playing with the children, coloring, doing like little games with them. And Aquarius is actually really good at teaching children because they think so outside the box and they're able to communicate and teach and share in a way that is just so unique. And children are unique in the way that they learn, right? So again, you might find you really like to work with children. You really vibe with children. And that sixth house of health and wellness and daily routines is ruled by Cancer. So again, I know you're going to hate this. I just know it. Your daily routines need to be very structured at home. Okay, fourth house of Taurus. It is very important you have a home routine. And I know this is going to kill you guys because you're just ready to get out there. Third house of Aries, right? You're just ready to go every day. Be out and about. You're running errands. You got people to see. You got people to talk to. You've got weird little ideas that spring upon you and you just need to action them. I get it. But you actually thrive best when you have a home routine. So I'm not saying stay at home the whole day. There's no fucking way you guys are going to do that. Or you might. Some of you might really like to be homebodies. That Taurus fourth house, you feel very comfortable at home. That's where you like to relax. That's where you like to have people come to you. Especially if you guys do have children, you can actually really thrive at home. But for those of you that still are the Uranian that needs to be out and about, have a morning and a night routine, okay? And please clean your house. I'm telling you, it will really, really help your mood. It'll help your energy. Remember, your Uranus is electric. So your auric field is extremely electric. So that fourth house of home and family, sixth house of Cancer, your home needs to be very grounding. So that electricity, right? So what I'm saying is your home shouldn't be overstimulating. Like, I wouldn't suggest being a maximalist. That Uranian energy will feel highly overstimulated. I would recommend having a lot of very natural, organic, grounding energy in your home, whether that's rocks and crystals, whether that's a lot of plants in your house. Maybe that's using a lot of natural fabrics, having natural tiles in your house. But your house can be very grounding and stabilizing for that Uranian energy. Okay, so sixth house, Cancer, have a morning and a night routine. Make sure you're taking care of your home. I'm telling you, it is the grounding rod for your electrical energy. You also want to deeply take care of your emotional body. And again, I know this doesn't make sense because you're not really feeling that many things, but you are. There are emotions stored there, and those need to be checked in with for your health and wellness to thrive. If you are suppressing the emotions, if you're disconnected from them, which is most often the case, they are going to affect the body, and Cancer does rule the stomach, the chest, and the heart, and that is an area where things can go awry. Okay, seventh house of the other, Leo. So what I want you to watch out for is stop performing in relationships, because Leo is the performer and Leo wants to be liked. Remember, Leo's the popular girl, okay? She's popular. She's the star cheerleader dating the quarterback boyfriend, okay? She's beautiful, she's bubbly, she's popular, everybody loves her. She's a star, okay? That is Leo. Aquarius is the niche girl, okay? She's like the emo girl who everybody thinks is fucking weird, but 15 years later, she's like a famous graphic designer, right? Or a famous writer that everybody thought was weird as fuck, but she was actually being authentic to herself and she was ahead of her time, while the cheerleader, you know, peaked in high school and now like is living not the best life. I'm not saying that this is how Leos will live. I'm just giving the example of this, right? Of the shadow states here. So Leo craves attention. They crave the spotlight. They are so self-expressive, which is why we love Leo. Leo is the sun. Leo brings brightness, boldness. Leo lets the rest of us know that it's okay to be over the top. It's okay to live a big, bold life and not make apologies for it. Okay? That's why we love Leo. The issue with being an Aquarius rising is that in relationships, you might find that you are craving that validation, craving that attention, right? And so, but this can be a little bit of a clash with your Aquarius rising, which really wants you to be authentic to yourself. So the one thing you have to watch out for is attracting relationships and being in relationships in which you are performing. In which you are performing for validation, but it's not your authentic self. But what I also find with Aquarius risings is people love you. That Leo 7th house just generates like so much like warmth and love and bigness, and that people actually are super gravitated towards you. So you do have to stay authentic so that you attract the right people and not just everyone wanting to give you applause kind of thing, but you have this natural center stage energy, even though the Aquarius rising doesn't necessarily want that much attention, it does kind of naturally come to you, okay? Now, this leads us to your 8th house, where this is the deep dive, right? This is where we have to dive deep into the well that lives within, okay? We have to face the demons here, the inner demons and the inner angels, okay? And we have to alchemize them and to some sort of wholeness. And so the 8th house is a lot about alchemy. Now, this is going to be ruled by Virgo. So this is a really interesting thing. So the first thing that I want to say to you guys is if you have any symptoms, like to me, the 8th house in general is a very somatic house, right? Because it is the opposing house of Taurus. And Taurus is the body, right? So Taurus is the physical body, whereas the 8th house is the psychological body, right? It's the nervous system, it's the fascia, it's the things that you can't really see, but the interplay between the 2nd and 8th house to me is very somatic. And so I think anytime we have symptoms or illnesses or anything, of course, we usually look to the 6th house of health and wellness. This usually tells us like what we can do to improve. See, the 6th house is about maintenance though, right? It's about maintaining our daily life. It's about maintaining efficiency. It's about maintaining the health and wellness in the body. But if the health and wellness is already tanked, maintaining it isn't where we're going to look. I think we need to look at the 8th house. Of course, there's caveats to a lot of this, but I think when we look to the 8th house, we'll often see that this is where a lot of psychic somatic symptoms or psychosomatic symptoms can arise through the 8th house, because it's very real, right? Emotions and traumas and triggers and wounds that live in the body absolutely manifest as symptoms. Like our bodies hold all of this stuff. And especially with a Virgo 8th house, I would say that for you guys working on somatic healing, making sure that a deep part of your health and wellness comes from shadow work. Like that is going to be a huge part of how you maintain your wellness, is by facing those fears, dealing with those traumas, dealing with those triggers. And if any psychosomatic symptoms present, my guess is that it's because there's something erupting in the 8th house that needs to be dealt with. But what you guys also might find is that hidden deep within the shadows of the 8th house, that 2nd house Pisces, but a lot of you might actually have to realize that you're actually quite judgmental, or maybe that you hold people to a standard of perfection that they simply can't meet. And this is also getting turned against the self. You have a standard of perfection for yourself that is impossible to meet. So I think that this house is going to come with a lot of forgiveness of self, and a lot of like letting go of trying to micromanage or control everything. And so it's a deep dive house, but I would definitely say a lot of your health and wellness is going to come from really dealing with the psychological aspects of life, right? And this brings us to the 9th house, which is that house of expansion and higher learning. This is where we want to have a big life in some way. We want to like live life to the fullest, have experiences, learn wisdom, speak our truth, right? And this is going to be ruled by Libra. And so I think for a lot of you, you might find that you do love to travel, that this is especially traveling with friends or partners, like you might really love group trips. You also might find that you, part of this kind of life experience and this wisdom that you are seeking and craving is with a partner, and having good relationships with people. I think you guys are very diplomatic. You could be great mediators, great people to deal with foreign relations, basically someone that can really see everyone's perspective. And I think someone who would do really well as leading an organization or being in the world stage in some way. And this leads to the 10th house of that purpose, that recognition, that kind of legacy you're trying to build, which is in Scorpio. Very interesting, right? And so I think that, I don't know, that's very interesting because a lot of you might think that or see that a lot of your recognition comes from this Scorpio energy. So you might be known for things that doesn't seem like it resonates for you, if this makes sense. Like maybe you're known because somebody died close to you, right? Maybe you're known for having like some sort of painful, negative experience happen around you. Maybe you are known for some secrets or some expose, right? Maybe you are known for being someone who talks about really taboo stuff. So I think that this actually is a house of discomfort for you because Scorpio, right, the traditional ruler of the eighth house, this is a very private area of life. So if we look at all the story arcs, the scorpionic area, traditionally the eighth house, this is a private house, okay? Sex, taxes, debts, money, inner desires, fears, triggers, traumas, those are very personal things. These are not things we go around talking about on a daily basis, okay? These are not things that we share with the public, right? These are private matters, okay? When you have a house of such privacy in the 10th house of public recognition, that is very discomforting. This is why I said I think that book would be great for you guys, The Courage to Be Disliked. Everything private about you feels like it's on display. And you know what? Embrace it. Also, third house Aries, speaking truth, saying things assertively, being straight up. If you embrace that Scorpio 10th house, okay, you allow in some ways that your private life, your innermost workings are somehow being seen, okay? For one, this creates great transparency, which I think Aquariuses are really good at. Embrace transparency. And also lean into this as say the things that are super uncomfortable. Say the things that, like if there's a rumor about you, fucking clear it up. Speak on it, right? Like you guys are people who are going to really benefit from full transparency, which is actually so inspiring, so refreshing. This is part of the Aquarian energy, right? This is why in this age of Aquarius, we're seeing a lot of patterns on like social media and stuff where people are like story time, and then they tell you the most unhinged story of all time, right? But this is transparency. This is where we bring the human experiences up to the front and we stop hiding things. We stop putting on a mask. We stop pretending we're perfect. And we start talking about the shit that is super taboo and super uncomfortable. But this is how we all come back to our humanness. This is how we exit the old world of lies and secrecy and corruption and shame. Shame is a big one. Shame and guilt. It is how we bring darkness into light. And this is your archetype. And so you might find that just you have to constantly kind of address uncomfortable things or be recognized or seen for uncomfortable things. And you just got to lean into it. Now, this leads to your 11th house, which is the house of Aquarius. This is how you make that impact on the world. This is your social network. This is your gifts and skills that you bring to the world. This is how you make a real impact on the collective, right? And kind of your service to the greater good. This is ruled by Sagittarius. Again, there's something very global about you guys. There's something, also Sagittariuses are extremely humorous, lighthearted. Again, Sag reminds us that life really isn't that serious. So lean into that humor, right? That Scorpio 10th house can feel a little bit heavy sometimes. Bring the humor, bring the optimism. Sagittarius is adventure. Again, also higher wisdom, higher knowledge, storytelling. I think you guys are excellent storytellers, right? Aries, third house, definitely the vibe. Ninth house in Libra, you are able to tell stories that connect with people on a personal level. 11th house Sag, you could be famous. You could be very well known for a particular story, for the wisdoms that you share, for the life experiences that you've had, right? And that you found a way to be honest about them and that this helps other people, right? And that you've also brought some humor to life about this. You guys would also do really well in like global trade of some kind. And this leads us to the 12th house of the subconscious, which must be integrated, which is Capricorn. So secretly, you guys are super You're secretly super traditional, and you like everything to be structured, and you like everything to be a certain way. And Capricorn's very, very hardworking. So I think you guys are very hard workers. But in the subconscious realm, there's a harshness here with Capricorn. So you want to be the humanitarian. You want to be the one who follows the beat of your own drum, if you will, and kind of follow the path that feels the most authentic, the most aligned for you. But secretly, not even secretly, subconsciously, there's a part of the soul that is craving power and status and money. And you have to make peace with that part. You have to make peace with the fact that subconsciously you want what everybody else wants. And if you can make peace with that part, you can say, okay, fine, I admit, I do want some traditional things. I actually, kind of do care about the same things that everybody else does. If you can accept that part of your humanness, you can still embrace being the trailblazer and the innovator and the person who breaks the mold and breaks the chains. But my pen just flew off. But not until you integrate that 12th house. If you don't integrate the 12th house, what it can lead to is that you can make decisions where you're subconsciously still chasing the traditional path. You want the traditional life, you want the money, you want the status, you want the power, but you're afraid to admit it. But what happens is then you end up getting into decisions and situations where you think you're doing it because it feels right. You think that this is cool, this is niche, but you're really doing it for the wrong reasons. And this will affect the transparency that is needed of your rising sign, right? You need to be transparent. And that includes with yourself. The other thing about the Capricorn 12th house is in business decisions, in life decisions about long-term goals, follow your fucking gut. I hate to say the gut because sometimes the gut's distorted, but follow the intuition. Okay, second house of resources, Pisces, 12th house, Capricorn. You guys have the ability to truly build like a really profound legacy, but you have to follow the intuition and you cannot follow the logic all the time, right? You also have to be careful here of a little bit of substance abuse because Capricorn, I would say Capricorn, Scorpio, and Pisces tend to suffer the most from substance abuse, and for all different reasons. Capricorns, because they're working so hard, it's a work hard, play hard mentality. So they're workaholics, and then they think then in order to have balance, they need to play as hard as they work, which often leads to substance abuse. Scorpios, it is simply out of like deep depression, typically, or obsessive compulsiveness. Scorpios are just very obsessive people. So they kind of, it's a go big or go home type of thing. They're either going to like go hard with it or they're not going to do it at all. Pisces is pure escapism. It's because they feel a level of suffering and pain within them that is very hard to cope with. So it's all very different, but you can suffer from substance abuse as well if you don't integrate that 12th house. Now, let's look at some of the examples here. So the first best example I have was Khloe Kardashian. I know I keep using the Kardashians, but they're so easy as examples because we know so much about them and their lives that it's they're kind of great to look at. She's a 25-degree Aquarius rising. 25 degrees is an Aries degree. So we can definitely see how she's very much the black sheep of her family, right? Like, there was lots of rumor. Again, what was she most known for originally? All these rumors of her mother possibly having an affair, Robert Kardashian not being her real dad, that she is like the black sheep, that she was adopted, like this whole scandal. Scorpio 10th house, right? And so she is the black sheep of the family. It's very obvious that she is different from her family. And I think that she has rebelled a little bit against the family, because you can see with the Taurus fourth house, she grew up in a fairly normal experience. Like, yes, they were wealthy and they were more famous and well-known. So that part's a little bit more special or unique, I should say. But in general, like, she grew up with brothers and sisters, grew up in a home with 2 married parents. Yes, her dad died. But like overall, nothing super crazy about her upbringing other than the fact that possibly, right, she has a different dad. Okay, and we don't know. But Taurus is also luxury, right? Grew up in a house of luxury. And so I think in many ways, her rebelliousness against the family, and she was always like a spitfire. If you guys ever watched the early Kardashian shows, I did. It's just a big millennial thing. She was a spitfire. She would say wild shit. Aries third house. Now, she was just always a little bit different than the rest of them. She was very honest, very transparent. She was always saying the shit that made everybody else uncomfortable. But that was her honesty. That was her transparency, perfectly in line with her Aquarius rising. Now, she is ruled by Saturn in Scorpio in the 8th house. So, couple of things from this, right? Well, that's her. So Saturn is the rules she has to play by, right? These are the things that, this is her cause, right? Saturn in Scorpio, 8th house. What did she do? When her father was dying, she took care of him. She was the one who helped raise her younger siblings. She was involved a lot in the caring of others, right? That's very Saturn and Scorpio. 8th house, her husband, Lamar Odom, who was a drug addict, overdosed many times, put himself into a coma, and she cared for him throughout that entire saga. Remember, I said Scorpio energy, that can be addiction, 8th house, death, secrecy, obsession energy. And again, what is she very known for? For that as well. Right? So that is a lot of her cause. Like, she feels an immense amount of obligation to care for people through death, addiction, traumatic events, right? But her Uranus is in Sagittarius in the 10th house. So her rebelliousness actually needs to be, for one, is leading her own life. And stop trying to take care of everybody else, right? She also has Mars in Scorpio and Pluto in Libra in the 8th house. So heavy contract there. Uranus in Sag 10th house. She needs to go out there and live life. And a lot of her purpose and career is to go out and have life experiences, to have fun, to have joy. Obviously, Sagittarius is a truth speaker, saying the ballsy thing, right? Not covering for people, not holding on to their secrets, not keeping things in the closet. It's to bring it out full front. And she actually has done that. She's spoken a lot on her podcast about this. She just was in the documentary, Lamar Odom's documentary, and has come out recently and talked about this. This is where she needs to be. Speaking the truth, saying it out loud, and saying it proud. Right? Not covering for other people, not holding in other people's secrets, not hiding things, but actually being a voice of extreme truth in that 10th house. And I think she's doing a pretty good job of that archetype. Now, the next one, Roseanne Barr, she's another wild card, 7-degree Aquarius rising, which is a Libra degree. And she is ruled by Saturn in Libra, also in the 8th house. So again, Saturn being her contract, her cause. I think that she cares a lot about her relationships and keeps them very private. I don't know too much about Roseanne Barr's like personal life, other than I know she's been very, very outspoken in recent years about what's going on in the world and politics, etc. Right? But she feels some sort of need maybe to provide for people in the 8th house, some sort of need to like have an obligation in her relationships and to keep them very private. But she's ruled by Uranus in Cancer in the 6th house at 18 degrees, the diabolical degree. So she's actually supposed to really rebel against, and I think she did rebel, and this is kind of funny about, the show that Roseanne was on, to rebel against this Susie homemaking type of lifestyle, right? And you can see with Khloe Kardashian, like she lives more, she falls into that Pisces second house trap a lot. She's constantly giving to people who like don't deserve it. She's constantly being so overly empathetic that it leads to bad situations. She is in more of a Susie homemaker lifestyle. She likes to be at home with her kids. She wants to be a wife. She wants to have a family. But eventually she's going to have to embrace that Uranus and Sagittarius in the 10th house. Roseanne Barr, I think, has done really well with her ruling Uranus and Cancer here. She rebelled against this like housewife, Betty Crocker type shit. She was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to live the way that I want to. I'm going to have a family and a home the way that I want to. And I'm going to completely rebel against this idea of that I need to just like have a husband and take care of them and be married and all this stuff. So that's a great example of Roseanne Barr. Whoopi Goldberg, also an Aquarius rising, 19 degrees, also a Libra degree. She is ruled by Saturn and Scorpio in the 9th house. We know that Whoopi has gotten into lots of trouble by saying shit that didn't really land. Okay? It's not really landing the way it should be landing, right? Because that's her cause. She feels like she's obligated to be saying the most controversial, upfront type of stuff in this very provocative, loud, in-your-face type of way. Okay, that's the Saturn and Scorpio 9th house. She also has her sun and moon in Scorpio in the 9th house. However, she has Uranus and Leo in the 6th house. So she's actually supposed to bring this like lightheartedness, this joy, the jokes. Back when Whoopi was funny and was more into like the lighthearted comedy, laughter, that was actually more in line with her archetype. Now she's heavy on the Saturn and Scorpio, and the Scorpio in the 9th house. You know, now since she's been on The View, it's like, oh, we have to talk about all these serious things and say the most provocative, like, things and be very, very fixated on a certain worldview and a certain perspective. And nobody likes it. Nobody wants it. That's the Saturn. We're feeling obligated to something, but in this life, it's meant to be leaning into the Uranus, which for her is Leo in the 2nd house. She's meant to really find her personal self-expression on a daily basis and to actually live a life that's filled with a lot of joy and creative energy and not so much on the heavy Scorpio energy, okay? Obama. 18 degree Aquarius ascendant, diabolical degree. That's very interesting. So I feel like he was either loved or hated. Also, 18 degrees, which is the diabolical degree. The moral of the story with the 18 degrees is it comes from Oppenheimer, who had a lot of 18 degrees in his chart. So they called it the Oppenheimer degree, or AKA the diabolical degree, because basically Oppenheimer believed in this nuclear power, right? He felt like he discovered something amazing and revolutionary. And after he created it, he had the moment where he realized, oh my God, what have I done? What have I created? He realized that he created something that was destructive and what it would be, and he couldn't go back. He couldn't uncreate it. That is the 18th degree. So I think Obama had a very unique contract where whatever he was there to create, and it was supposed to be for humanity, for the collective. And I think he tried in many ways. I do think Obama was very, very light. He did get hijacked by the dark. They all do. They all do. I think a lot of the things he created, he couldn't uncreate. And there's a lot of things that are still playing out to this day that have become harmful to the collective. And again, no shade, no person, it's not personal. Like it happens to everybody, but I do think that was especially like kind of true of him. Now he's ruled by his Saturn and Capricorn in the 12th house. So he comes off, right? Saturn and Capricorn, 12th house. That is where you secretly want to be in power. You secretly want to be at the top of the totem pole. You want to be the boss. You want to be in charge. You want the status. You want the accolades. And so I think that maybe he had to be honest with himself about what his real agenda was with wanting to be president, because I think he comes off as a very personable person. He's extremely charming, extremely likable, right? That's the Leo 7th house. But we don't know what the real agenda is here. We don't know like what you're really trying to do, right? And so I think that I don't know him well enough, right, to know if he integrated that Saturn and Capricorn in the 12th house, or if that was ruling him subconsciously, right? If that was kind of still weighing in the subconscious, and we just, aren't aware of it. But his Uranus rulership is 25 degrees Leo in the 7th house. So again, he was here to really spearhead, like putting himself out there into the world, which he did. And he's a very likable person. I think it's questionable about whether a lot of this is performance or whether it's authentic. I think it could be a little bit of a mix of both, but he was definitely meant to be seen, be in the spotlight, and he really leaned into that kind of charisma, I think, in terms of his relationships. He also has Mars, Pluto, and his North Node in the 7th house. So there's kind of a lot mixed in there that I think, could have affected how he formed different alliances and different relationships with people. But overall, I think he's a good example of an Aquarius rising. And finally, Janis Joplin, also a 25 degree. Who else was 25 degrees? Khloe Kardashian, 25 degrees Aquarius ascendant. She's another good example of that Taurus 4th house, because she came from a very like practical, kind of mundane family, right? And she really just like followed this crazy path to become famous. I remember like reading, I think it was a book about her, or a documentary, and it was like, her parents thought she was crazy, obviously. Like, what are you doing? And like living in San Francisco, just like trying to become a singer. And of course, she's been one of the biggest stars of her time, one of the most unique voices, one of the most unique performers that we had seen up until that point, right? And she was also very ostracized. Like, if you read documentaries or watch documentaries about her, read about her, she felt very alone. And I also think that could be a theme within a lot of these folks, is again, because they're different, because people don't really understand them all the time, they can feel a sense of aloneness and ostracizedness, where they just feel like they don't fit in. And I think Janis was one of those people. Now, she was also ruled by a Saturn in the 8th house. I'm sorry, reading the wrong thing. My bad. Saturn in Gemini in the 3rd house. So interestingly, her contract, right, she felt obligated to use her voice, to sing, to share, to express herself. And it's also where her Uranus was. So her Uranus and Saturn were actually conjunct within a few degrees of one another in that 3rd house. It absolutely was her path. She brought a very unique sound, a very unique voice to the world, and she did fulfill it. She did follow her path. She followed who she was. I think that sense of aloneness really hits with the Aquarius risings. But overall, for my Aquarius rising, my Uranian babes, it's about authenticity. It's about transparency and speaking your truth no matter what. Telling your story, sharing your wisdoms, putting your voice out into the world. And I'm telling you, lean into the Leo 7th house. It's very easy for you to actually be seen and be celebrated, and for people to, but just don't do it for the wrong reasons, right? But you do have it's almost like the universe set you up perfectly. Like, you have this very unique archetype that needs to be brought to the world, perspectives, truths, wisdoms, ideas, innovations that need to be shared with the world. And you can easily be seen. You can just have this way of people gravitating towards you and hearing you and listening to you. So just lean into it. You don't need to be isolated. You don't need to be the black sheep, although it might feel like that a lot. But you're going to have to lean into being more seen. And it's okay to be a little mainstream. It's okay. All right. It's not going to kill you to just be a little mainstream. You can still be super niche. But I love you guys so much. And I'll be back soon with our final archetype, which will be Pisces risings.